First off, a big thank you to the amazing feedback I received from a lot of people in my first lore video. It went better than I expected, and now I'm hoping to keep improving the quality as I go on. Alright, so on to today's actual topic. If you somehow missed the title and the thumbnail, I'm going to be talking about bandits. Now put your cheeky brookie aside for a second. Bandits are actually a seriously interesting and in-depth faction. There's two types of bandits in S.T.A.L.K.E.R. The Shadow of Chernobyl bandits, who are your regular antagonistic highwaymen. They're your early game enemies and fight you every step of the way through the cordon, garbage, Agroprom underground, wild territory, and their bases in the Dark Valley. There's not much depth to the bandits in Shadow of Chernobyl, given that you can't reason with them, but there's still a lot of interesting stuff going on. The de facto bandit leader in Shadow of Chernobyl is Borov, who, taking over from his former boss Yoga, moved the bandit headquarters from a train hangar and garbage to the Dark Valley complex as Freedom abandoned it. His underlings call him an aristocratic wannabe, but Borov considers himself a natural born leader. Considering he took over and led his men on an exodus from garbage to Dark Valley, it's hard to disagree with him. You must fight him in order to gain access to X-18, cutting short his reign of terror, as well as his story. Now, Shadow of Chernobyl doesn't do a bad job depicting bandits, it's just with having to be hostile to them, we miss out learning more on how their gangs function. We know they rob people, that they kidnap people and interrogate them for information, given that we have to save Nimble at the start of a game.
I'm right here! Help me! I owe you, brother.
And they also do deals with other groups, considering in Shadow of Chernobyl they're allied with the mercenaries and neutral to Freedom. Freedom is relatively understandable. Freedomers have a nonchalant attitude to those that don't threaten them. They have big numbers and good guns, so it'd go poorly for the bandits to attack them anyway. According to Barkeep, the bandits have paid off the mercenaries to not fight with them. This also becomes mutually beneficial considering they can work together to rob ecologists and loners throughout the wild territory. This makes a lot of sense considering both groups are founded on private interests of power and profit. It's only reasonable they team up to achieve these. Shadow of Chernobyl still has a few unique bandits you run into though. First off would be Vasyabor in the garbage. He's the group leader that attacks Bess's camp. Even though he's a rookie, he and his small army of bandits are a major threat, and should you not aid Bess, they're likely to take the scrapyard and become a nuisance throughout the garbage later on. We also have Friar, who came to the zone looking for adventure. Brome, the drunken Judier, who you find in the 100 Reds bar, is friend of being kicked out of duty because he lost his storming of a Khan, a unique gun given to him from General Voronin himself. Brome will ask you with finding Friar to retrieve his gun. Mind you, Friar can be found in Dark Valley, Agroprom underground, garbage, or in the wild territory, although it's most likely he's in the underground. This is a nice little side quest you can do, although it has some unique modifiers to it. Should you acquire the quest after receiving the military documents in Agroprom, but before doing the main quest in Dark Valley, Friar will be marked in a different location, but if you ignore the main quest and go back to the underground, he will instantly teleport there. If you stand too long in the Agroprom underground after finding Sherlock's stash, there's a chance Friar will spawn next to an entrance. So basically, he can be anywhere. Onto our last unique bandit for Shadow of Chernobyl is Poker, who is known to be an evil psychopath amongst all stalkers. Everyone fears him and he has no friends. He allegedly contracted a unique disease deep into the zone, which affects his memory according to General Voronin, so is prone to being friendly to someone and blasting them away an hour later. Just like Friar, you can receive a mission to kill him either from Barkeep or Voronin. Poker holds a unique Spaz 14 and is most likely to be found in Agroprom or Wild Territory. That's the extent of bandits in Shadow of Chernobyl, a group of gangsters, killers and thieves. It's interesting that Friar and Poker, both the unique bandit targets, are the only expert bandits outside of Wild Territory, while Borov is a veteran. I guess this in a way shows that bandits in Shadow of Chernobyl might be centralized in Dark Valley, but the further you get from that, the more lone wolves you see with a lot of experience under their belt. As we move back a year, we see a different sort of bandits in Clear Sky, being united almost entirely in garbage. Yoga's plan is to centralize his power in the garbage, controlling access to many other key areas. Although bandits aren't openly hostile in Clear Sky like they are in Shadow of Chernobyl, they're just as ruthless. Your first encounter with bandits will be as you try to enter the garbage from the cordon. You'll be held up by a large group, and if you want to pass through, you have to give them all your money, yes, all of it. Same goes if you want to pass through them into the Agroprom as well. Although it's early in the game, you could still try to fight them, but if you have any interest of trading in their train yard base, potentially joining them, fighting them can ruin this opportunity. One good thing to know is that the amount of money you have doesn't matter. When I entered the garbage, I had to give them all my money, which was 260 rubles. I then wanted to go to Agroprom and had to pay them all my money again, which was 0 rubles. When they take all your money though, they say something fairly relevant, something along the lines of them not leaving you defenseless, so you can go on to still survive. Whether this is because they don't really want you to die because they're not entirely evil, or is it because if you survive, they can make more money off of you later on? It's not really clear, and that's probably intentional, but it's an improvement in terms of personality and depth over the Shadow of Chernobyl bandits. Despite having more depth in Clear Sky, they're not as populous like in Shadow of Chernobyl. As you enter their garbage base, there's a lot to see. You'll see the vehicle scrapyard more populated, but as it turns out, it's being used as a labour camp by the bandits, where they force captured loners to search amongst the anomalous and irradiated yard, presumably looking for artifacts. You can assist the loners by working with Father Valerian and Wild Napier to rescue these captured stalkers, but if you wish to be on good terms with the bandits, it's best to leave them be. That's the extent of the bandit exploits in Clear Sky, except for later on in the months you'll find a squad of heavily kitted out bandits fighting against the monolith. There's not too much to discuss about that, but it kinda suggests that they're going their own way. They're kinda more like mercenaries considering, how well geared up they are compared to the average bandit. As you go into the train yard, you'll meet the current bandit leader Yoga. He's a laid-back man with many connections, potentially even the military. Considering that the bandits that were raiding Father Valerian's trade with Sidrovich on behalf of Major Koletsky, this makes sense. He's supposedly one of the original bandits. He, Borov, and some former ex-cons all moved to the zone to organize and continue their crimes. Speaking of Borov, if you head to the bar, there he is. Interesting to see how a barkeeper became the leader of a faction in such a short period of time. From the general consensus of the area, it seems that he's not really a good leader, having supposedly come to power from assassinating his high ranks and rivals. Not many bandits are in high morale, and short of what they do in the garbage, they're not really an active faction. Under Yoga, the bandits are slowly dying, as there's little motivation or discipline amongst Yoga's underlings. These are all justifiable reasons as to why Borov usurped Yoga's position and took a more decisive role as a bandit leader later on. I'd like to point out that although at this point in time the bandits were fairly organised, you can notice that they don't really attack anyone else except loners without your aid. It kinda goes to show that although they're kinda big, they've got a good spot. They're not really that powerful, and that activity a part of a faction wars only when you get involved kinda just underlines that at the start the bandits were a nuisance, nobody liked them, but they weren't a major threat like they become later on. That's all for the bandits of Clear Sky. As we move on to the bandits in Call of Pripyat, we can see how they become a different kind of faction. Although still of a gang-like structure and behaviour, the leadership and work of them becomes more secretive compared to them in the past two games, where they were more based on clearly defined territory and brute strength. You meet one of the first bandit leaders quickly in Call of Pripyat, Skadvosk within Sultan, a bandit known as Knuckles. Sultan's bodyguard tells you he wants to talk.
Sultan wants to see you.
So, you managed to drag your ass over here? Bravo!
Sultan is the main leader of the bandits in Call of Pripyat, especially Sultan, although he's not the leader of them all. An ex-con with a troubled past, he came to the zone and joined the bandits, over time rising through the ranks becoming a kingpin. His way of leading the bandits is much more secretive and organised than Yoga or Borov's. He's less chaotic in his behaviour compared to his predecessors. Although there's splinter groups of bandits which act different, but I'll touch on those later. Sultan believes his bandits aren't petty thieves or murderers like they commonly were in Shadow of Chernobyl and Clear Sky. He believes instead they're enforcers of his particular brand of order, which is a very mafia term to use. When you arrive, he's been trying to take over Skadvosk from Beard and his loners. One contact who aids him in this is Al, a loner who deals in general items and information, but who is sympathetic to the bandits. Sultan first hires you to aid Knuckles on an attack on the loners in the Shevchenko in order to reduce the loners' numbers in the area. You can either help Sultan or talk to Grouse, Skadvosk's sheriff, Spartacus, the lone leader on the ruined ship, or tip off Beard. They all have the same effect if you're ambushing the bandits with the loners. You can either help one side or just ignore it and there's a chance either side will win. That's not the limit to Sultan's nefarious activities though. He also exchanges artifacts, presumably taken from loners, to trade with duty supply officer Morgan in return for weapons, sending an assassin after the loner Snag for being a notorious thief. There's also a variety of other schemes that Sultan leads, and you, as a player, either as a loner or bandit, can take part in them from either side. Whilst Yoga was a slack leader, Borov was in some ways a gang leader or warlord. Sultan acts and feels like a genuine mob boss, setting up hits, staging black market deals with individuals from rival factions, and generally expanding his power through underhanded means. Sultan is perhaps the best bandit leader they've had throughout all the games, and it's up to the player whether he's even more successful or gets outed from his seat in Skadvosk. So along with sinister Sultan, there are also the leaders Shishak and Jack, both laying claim to different areas of Yanov, while Sultan leads the bandits in Sultan. Shishak and Jack are both leaders of their own groups, so your relationship with Sultan and his bandits has no effect on either of these two. These two leaders are a bit more heavy-handed than Sultan, but still more sophisticated in their operations compared to their predecessors from the prior games, dealing in robbery, raiding and kidnapping for Shishak, and loan sharking for Jack. I won't get into too much more for these two because I feel they deserve their own video together, since you need to do both of their missions to receive the Diplomat achievement. I may have missed some less than major bandit characters or leaders, but I feel I covered the bandits' leadership and personality over the 3 Stalker games adequately. In Shadow of Chernobyl, they essentially are just highwaymen, brigands, raiders, whatever you want to call them. The bad guys who you can't reason with, they're there to give you a hard time early on in the game. I do like how Friar and Poker have a small amount of uniqueness in them and were high priority targets with unique guns, but short of that, Borov had little personality to him in Shadow of Chernobyl, given you couldn't talk to him at all. That changes though in Clear Sky. You get to see a more centralized bandit faction in the garbage. They care more about taking your money than just killing you. That doesn't mean they're afraid of committing outright slavery though, from what we saw in the scrapyard. Yoga is depicted as a slack leader who got to his position by killing his competitors, while we see Borov as the aspirational underling, willing to do anything to become the leader. Although in a good geographical position, the bandits are growing weaker under Yoga's leadership with low morale and motivation. They rarely strike out against their neighbouring enemies of duty and Valerian's loners. It's understandable as to why Borov seized power and led the bandits to a safer headquarters. And it appears to have worked well, given bandits cover much more ground in Shadow of Chernobyl than Clear Sky, although being more outright hostile, but I believe that's due to Shadow of Chernobyl being the earlier game and lack of story foresight being the issue rather than design choice. Call of Pripyat's bandits are simply awesome. They're more reminiscent of mobsters rather than typical bandits, and Sultan certainly looks and acts apart. Intimidation, assassination, black market trading, loan sharking, kidnapping and robbing. The bandits of Sultan and Yanov do it all. Shishak and Jack both have their own unique niche of banditry which I liked, although I felt it'd be better if more could be done with them, especially if you sided with the bandits, but it still adds a great amount of variety to their faction. With Sultan, you have a lot of opportunities to profit from being a bandit, as well as to aid the faction's power and growth. Sultan did well to seize leadership of the bandits and to turn them more inwards to being more secretive and cunning, rather than simply brutish and hostile, which we saw more in the previous installments. Although many still are, as across the outside wastes of his own bandits still fight many factions as they're rightfully hated and opposed, yet Sultan has the power and audacity to sit inside the Skadvosk, Valona Central, across from Valona's only real leader, Beard. I've always liked the way bandits act and look in Stalker, but after researching them this in depth, I feel they may be my favourite faction. I don't think any others can compare to their depth and progression over the game's trilogy. From mere mean guys with guns to organised crime groups, bandits are awesome to experience whether you love them or hate them, whether you're with them or shooting at them. What topic would you like me to cover in my next Stalker lore video? After the great reception of the first one, I'm keen to keep on going with your support. If you're new, I suggest subscribing to the channel to keep up to date with new videos. I'm Al, and as always, thanks for watching.